My guest today is Katherine Gillette. Kat is a true and authentic astral traveler and what she calls a student of the universe. She's interested in understanding her gifts and learning about the experiences others have had, those not explained by conventional science or dismissed as non-believable. She says being weird ain't easy, but it sure is interesting. She's referring to her astral travels, lucid dreaming, and interacting with extra-dimensional beings. She says it took her years to make sense of these highly unusual things, during which she says she was learning from the beings who worked with her. The result, she says, is a unique view of life, the nature of reality, and insights into human existence and beyond. She helps others to understand these things through her YouTube channel, guided meditations, and her services as a spiritual consultant. Welcome to my show, Kat.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So tell me your story. When did you first realize you had, I'll call them psychic abilities, to keep it simple? Astral travels, lucid dreaming, we'll get into all that, but when was your first experience where you knew you had these gifts?
Well, when I was a kid, we used to go to the public library a lot, and I, by chance, stumbled into the metaphysical section and checked out a book that was literally called Soul Travel or something along those lines. And what it had laid out in it was a meditation practice, basically. And being raised in a agnostic family, I didn't have any frame of reference for anything spiritual. Never went to church, didn't get told bedtime stories about angels, anything like that. To me, I thought it was more like an interesting science experiment. Like, if I do these things, is this real? So I was 12 years old when I started a pretty serious nightly meditation practice, which I suppose is kind of an odd pastime for a kid. But
Well, ironically, I grew up Catholic, was an altar boy, and they didn't teach us about what a meditation is. We would do prayers, and only the prayers in the prayer book. So ironically, you didn't miss out on anything. It might even have helped you have an open mind as well.
Yeah, I think the younger you are, the more you have an open mind about what might be and what might not be, and you are more open-minded to possibilities. And so since I had checked this book out, the metaphysical section is in the non-fiction section, I thought I was being a big kid, and, who knows if it's in the adult book section, if it's in the grown-up stuff, maybe it's real. So I kind of had an opener mind going into it about what the outcomes might be.
So you do the meditation. How long after you start doing these meditations? Because it seems you are naturally predisposed, gifted, whatever you call it. Like some people have better eyesight, better hearing, to go into these experiences. But how long after you started reading this book did you have your first experience?
Well, after working with it for a while, I thought it was interesting enough. I could feel energy in my body, move it around my body. I could do a lot of the things that it was talking about. And one night I got a lot of people call it getting a download nowadays, but I'm embarrassed to admit it. We weren't really downloading anything in those days. That's a newfangled terminology at that point. I just always called it getting the knowing. And the first download or knowing I ever got said, you're not really in to begin with.
Not in.
Inside your body. It's not a jam jar. You're not trapped inside of it.
Oh, but you weren't having a near-death experience. You were in your body. They were just saying it's not real. Is that what they meant?
No, it's more like the gist of getting the download was more like consciousness is more like a frequency, like a radio station. You're tuned to your body to be having this experience, but that doesn't mean that all the other stations aren't simultaneously broadcasting. And if you know how to change your frequency to the right station, you can experience any of the things that are being broadcast. So you're not really trapped inside your body. You're tuned to your body like a radio station for receiving that signal.
What did they mean when they said you're not in?
You're not really inside your body.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You're not on the radio. You're listening to the radio.
Yeah. You're just tuned to the station of receiving the signal from physical reality.
So you get this download, it's the message, and download, for those who don't understand the term, it's like an instantaneous knowledge, right? Basically, you just know all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, it's where you get information in total concept format.
So you don't hear it and think about it. All of a sudden you're aware of, you just know it, right?
Yeah. And then it's almost like you have to scramble to sort out, like put a word order on the knowing to figure out to
Well,
explain
the
it to
language is
yourself.
an interesting thing. I almost wonder if language is more of a crutch than, I mean, we can't communicate, telepathically and other ways. Otherwise, it seems the language language is a barrier. If you go to a country, you don't speak it. So what was the next experience? You got the download. When did you
Yeah.
actually start traveling?
It wasn't long after that I was laying on the couch reading a book one afternoon and went to roll over, like to shift my body position. And actually, like, I thought I had fallen off the couch onto the floor. But when I stood up and turned around and looked, my body was still there on the couch and it hadn't moved.
And
And
then
so
what?
that was the first time I had ever gotten out of my body purely by accident. Like I hadn't been trying to do it or anything, just
You
sort of
fell
like
off the
fell
bike.
out.
I fell off the bike.
And like most people who first experience astral travel, that initial experience didn't last for very long. You kind of panic and go, oh my God, what's happening? And you end up right back in. So, but after that, it would happen spontaneously, sporadically on its own
Mm.
on occasion. And so, I felt pretty excited about that result. It turns out this book seems to be perfectly accurate to me. The things it asked me to do turned out I'm able to get out of my body now. So that's a real thing.
Well, and you call it astral travel. I was wondering if there's a definition to astral travel. It could be just get out of your body. You don't have to travel that far. Getting out of your body is what you call the astral travel.
Yeah, there's different definitions for it depending on who you're talking to and depending on what ways they work with it. Obviously, at first, I didn't have any definition or any knowledge of what it meant. I just knew that I wasn't experiencing reality inside the body anymore.
I wanted to ask you, so you weren't scared at all.
At this point, I wasn't scared.
It just like I would be really concerned if all of a sudden I was not in my body. I guess I wouldn't be concerned. I'd just be like, how can I get back? How can I get back?
Yeah. Well, like I said, my first experiences was with it were literally that it's easy to get back. In fact, all too easy. I was having to learn how to remain out for longer periods of
Huh,
time so I could wander around because that
huh.
tether, it really does pull you right back the minute you feel unstable or insecure
It
in
reminds
the
me of like
form.
if I was learning to swim, they take you to the YMCA and they put you in the I don't know, they put you in the water, take you out of the water, or something. You start to feel safe
Yeah.
because
So
that's
at first you don't get very far because the human ego personality, like the waking personality,
mm-hmm.
once it's not inside the format it's used to, feels unstable, shaky about it. And so it's sort of like anything else, practice. You feel more
Or maybe
comfortable with
you
something the more you practice.
or maybe you've the dial's moved itself because you didn't move it intentionally. You're like, wait a minute, I want it back on the station. It's got too much static. What's that static about? I want to turn it back.
Yeah, there's definitely a comfort level that needs to develop. And that's pretty common for anybody who's ever had an out of body experience. Is it feels awkward at first, and at first they maybe just float a little bit and end up right back in because it's something to get acclimatized to.
What is the difference between, it's the same term, out of body experience people use who have near death experiences. Is there
Mhm.
technically a difference between what you're doing and they're doing? They just go once and most people just go and they're gone. And some people come back once and that's it till they die and you go anytime you want. Is it all the same thing?
Well, it's kind of the same within the same family of energetic actions of changing the station to different stations. When you first get out of your body and you're an energetic form operating in physical reality still. So you're still hanging around here in this realm, but not in your physical form.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of
And is
its
this
character.
something you can teach people? I mean, I guess you could get that book and just do the meditation, but that sounds too easy, like more people would be doing it. Or maybe they don't want to, but is it something you can teach? You've been able to teach people?
Well, I mean, I can give people the roadmap for how to do stuff like this, but the biggest obstacle and the biggest block that people have for themselves is their own frustration or disbelief.
Mm. Yeah.
sometimes when we get too attached to the result, where we're
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I need to get out of my body, I want to get out of my body, and then we feel like a failure because it's not working or it's not
Sure.
happening fast enough. So a lot of the time, it really comes down to people's, frustration levels or disbelief, like this isn't working for me. There's
Do
a
you
lot of
think their spirit, it's like, no, you're not going, like you're staying in the classroom or whatever, we're just not allowing you to leave because you won't come back. Like, have you ever thought of not coming back?
But you mean like getting out and not coming back?
Yeah,
Well,
like,
see,
or just like I wasn't supposed to know this, that I was listening to the radio. I wasn't supposed to know this, but you do. So have you ever thought of not coming back, just traveling for,
no, honestly. And again, my journey was a little bit, so after I got out of my body, I thought, if this is real, I wonder what else is real. And so it was back to the public library for me, where I checked out a book of spells and rituals and thought that it would be fun. In my
oh,
kid
no.
mind, I thought it would be fun to
Oh,
do summoning fairies as my first,
fairies.
yeah, as
Okay.
my first
They seem
foray into
harmless.
performing. Well, they seem harmless because you and I both thinking Tinkerbell, but it turns out Disney lied to us.
Well, I have some friends on an organic farm in Oregon. They're really weirdo hippies. I use that with I don't want to use the word weird. Different. Well, they claim they see fairies, and they don't refer them as to be a negative thing. They enjoy seeing the fairies. Did you have a different experience with the fairies?
Well, here's the thing: is people get the wrong idea about personalities on the other side. So some people you meet here in physical reality are fine and perfectly nice, right?
Yeah.
And some that you meet aren't.
Good point. Yeah.
So not everything that you come across is going to have the exact same personality just because you've come across it,
That's a
right?
great point. Yeah. There's nice people and there's not so nice people. Yeah.
Exactly. You can have a negative experience with the being just walking through Walmart. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily have to
Yeah.
be, but you can also
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
positive experiences. So it kind of depends. And a lot of it also depends on your own cognition of the experience. So what happened to me is, after I performed this summoning and nothing happened and I was irritated with it, I just kind of walked away from it. But that night, I ended up being, as I was doing my meditation, I ended up flung out of my body all the way across the room. And then when I stood up and looked, hunched over my body, sitting on the bed, was this large, dark figure, like hovering over my body.
That's the fairy.
Well,
Oh
whatever
no, this
it
is
was terrifying.
or is this when you're doing the spells? This is when you're doing
Yeah, I had literally performed a ritual that said for summoning fairies. As to, and again, I kind of come at things from a completely
well,
you know what I mean,
fairies are the,
non-indoctrinated point of view. So whether or not it's actually a fairy is up for debate, I think.
well, fairies like to cause trouble. So a fairy probably put
Mhm.
that in the book, and you're probably doing a spell for something else they like to call they like to, what's the word for it? Be mischievous. Well, that's what I'm told anyhow. So
Certainly, it's a mistake for people to assume that beings that are come from different planes of existence have the same thought processes or culturalizations that humans do.
uh
So just because the behavior is not something that we would appreciate
yeah,
here in our physical reality doesn't mean that it's not normal and culturally appropriate for wherever they come from.
yeah.
Because I was 100% terrified, as
Well,
you
it's
might
just like
imagine, having something like that in the room. But
most people in America, if they went to another country besides Europe or an English-speaking one, if they went to South America or Africa, the same thing, even amongst people, cultural differences. But so tell me about the spirit guides and angels that you run into versus the demons, because you said you run into some spirit guides and angels who they're used to humans, they make you feel calmer, safer. But then you also run across some demons who aren't harmful, but you call them demons.
yeah, and that's kind of a term that it's a commonly used term that is an easy definition, sort of like saying psychic in general. I think that a lot of what I come across would be considered demons by a lot of people, just because of the negative energy that surrounds a lot of them and the way that they portray themselves a lot of times when you come into contact with them. I'm not convinced that there's some sort of evil entity or anything, though. In fact, in most cases, they turn out not to be. There's a phenomenon people call the shadow people. It's like when you have sometimes it's called a sleep paralysis demon, like when there's basically a dark entity or a dark figure in the room. And for many, many years, I was like a magnet for those types of entities. Would end up with them all the time. I'd get out of my body and there'd be the 6 of them standing on my front lawn. So I'd be surrounded, and you can imagine that for a long time, that was scary, right? Terrifying. And I had a lot of negative encounters with entities like that. But over time, the fear subsides and even the anger subsides and everything else falls away.
Let me ask you this. Like in our world, if you go to the wrong side of the neighborhood and the wrong type of people are there, you could get harmed for no reason. I mean, well, it's your wallet or your car keys, whatever, and you don't give them up or, you'd be physically harmed. Can you get physically, it's not physical out there, can you get energetically harmed or harmed some other way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that probably for, humanity at this point has developed far enough along where we understand that the only kind of harm there isn't physical harm. Like psychological harm is a real thing. Emotional harm is a real thing. So I think it's a mistake to call them harmless because, without some sort of understanding of it, certainly I went through this for years, you can be afraid, you can be emotionally traumatized. I have personally never had any actual physical effect from it, but there are certainly reports and things of cases where that happened.
Well, you're not in a physical form. I meant energetically. Could they take your power or harm you somehow energetically? Psychologically, I have to wrap my head around, the definition. Being a logical person, I break it down. Like, what do we mean when we say psychological? I know what you mean, trauma, but how does it work energetically? Can I describe it? And what you're saying is, to best your knowledge, it's not like they're sucking your power or harming you energetically directly.
The way that I would describe it is that they're looking for validity input.
What's validity
they're definitely
input?
wanting, it's like when you give them your energy or you give them a strong energetic reaction, it helps them stabilize their own validity. And honestly, like a lot of what humans do, their behaviors here on Earth are seeking validity input, right? And even among us humans, it causes some unfortunate behavior. Baiting, a lot of people yelling at each other, making negative comments.
The theory about, what do they call it? The lizards, the reptilians.
You mean as a species?
A species, an entity that lives, you could call them in the shadows, just outside our physical dimension. And kind of like that movie, the Walt Disney movie, the old one, where the sorcerer, something that's not physical, it's gaining energy from your fear. It lives off. The theory is that these reptilian entities live in the non-physical, just outside of reality, and they feed off our fear energetically.
Yeah, that's a lot of them are looking. And again, I don't use the same terminology as everybody else because I wasn't, again, socialized or indoctrinated into any kind of thought process. Yeah. Personally, I've never seen one look like a lizard. So, I mean, but
yeah, I don't know that you'd see them as lizards in the non-physical. It's just, I think, kind of the historically, they pass down the stories. Maybe they use it as a metaphor, or just you have to describe them in some way in your own language.
Yeah, all I do is report what I've actually experienced, so I don't try to put a.
That's great. Yeah, and then you don't misinterpret it. Misinformation, disinformation.
Exactly. I'm not going to put my own interpretation on it and be like, yes, reptilians, because literally I've never experienced anything that came across reptilian like that to me. I have interacted.
What I meant I've just wondered if, because you say for the most part you meet a lot who are wanting validation, they're using that energy. It sounded like what you meant.
Yeah, there definitely are entities out there that are seeking validity input, who want your energy, who want your reaction, who are trying to generate a reaction off of you. And one of the strongest energies that we have as physically focused humans is fear or anger.
Yeah.
Because we live in a physical body, we can be afraid of physical harm. And that's a very strong, powerful energy. Things that exist in non-physical don't have that same vibration. So it's one of the things that it's easy to generate off of us that's actually a very strong energy, which is why fear is used.
That presupposes it works the flip way, which means we're also a powerful species if we emanate love instead of fear.
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind about that at all.
Something they can't do either.
This physical experience is actually highly regarded, highly prized, highly looked at. Being here, I know a lot of spiritual people kind of have the opposite viewpoint of it, is that we're trying to ascend to leave this plane in some way.
Yeah, I don't really buy into that theory.
No, it's literally not the impression that I get from anything that I've ever witnessed.
Well, for starters, Kat, if that was true, you wouldn't need any downloads. I mean, you would already know everything. Why would you need to advance for it? You just ask for the downloads. If you need them, somebody will give them to you. You know everything you need to know. That's my take on So, the angels and spirit guides, where do you think they come from? And the demons, where do you think they come from? Have you talked to them? Where's your home? Where do you really live?
Yeah, I spent years and years asking questions, and sometimes they're a little vague about the answers, and sometimes you can get stuff out of them. The easiest,
stranger danger,
honestly,
I don't want to tell you where I live.
Well, it's more like I've always gotten the impression that, to some degree or another, they're not supposed to just blurt out and say things. It's easier to get people to, how do I say this well? If they're working with concepts that really there's no human concept for, it's hard to just say things in words that are going to be understandable. So it's like there's a buildup of knowledge that kind of needs to happen before concepts really make sense. Some of it would be very difficult to explain to people who have no human concept for what's actually going on. So it's like you kind of need the experience buildup of seeing things and experiencing them for yourself, where you're like, oh, this makes sense.
I'm just trying to grasp what a lot of people probably are like. Why are we here? Where are we really? Who are we really?
As far as I can tell, this isn't a place, it's a technique of experience. So condensing energy down to the vibrational point where it's actually tangibly interactable is a technique of experience that consciousness uses to more deeply explore what things are possible and to create things on a broader scale. Humans.
And then once these things created, they would exist energetically outside the form?
Yeah. In all kinds of different dimensions, all kinds of different timelines, and all kinds of different things going on.
Say again, the timelines?
Yeah, basically anything that you create energetically has its own validity, its own signature. Any pattern that you create exists in perpetuity. And a lot of people don't, I don't know, how do I say this? It's very difficult from a human perspective, from our point of view, to appreciate just how valuable the experience of being here is. If you don't have any resistance, if you don't have anything to hold the energy back from manifesting things immediately, then you don't have the space to imagine, to create, to want, to actually yearn for something or try for something. In non-physical reality spaces, it's like the energy that you are creating or putting out there manifests immediately. It would be like, think about when you're in a dream space, dreams move and shift and change all around you as you're creating the environment. There isn't that there's nothing to hold back the energy from manifesting immediately. So literally the things that need to happen are happening so fast that you don't have time to think about them or want something different or imagine something different or really even appreciate. Something that happens immediately and is given to you is just, that's the expected norm. So physical reality actually creates a density of energy to where those principles don't happen immediately. You have time to think about things and want things and create imaginings in your mind and pathways for getting there and different ideas before anything actually happens.
Hmm.
Creating that
For some people, that's a problem. They're like,
I
why do I have to
know,
try
yeah.
so hard? Or they want like the secret. All I need to do is think about it and I'll have it without doing any work or having to wait for it.
Yeah. And part of, again, releasing the expectation of the outcome and just feeling free in the creation of the path
Uh-huh.
helps a lot with that.
So do
You're
you
right. A lot of people do want success overnight, or they want things immediately, or they
uh-huh.
want to go, you know, but part of the fun of being here is that they don't happen immediately. Like if you were on the other side, you would realize that it's a lot of this touches on lucid dreaming too, because a lot of the reason people want to be able to lucid dream is so they can make things happen immediately that they can't make happen in physical
Uh-huh.
reality. But you have to understand from the point of view of the locals, we experience things that they just don't.
So
We can experience wanting and longing and hoping. We can experience the real joy when something we want happens, like
uh-huh.
because there was that tension. It creates tension points
Uh,
between happenings, basically,
some
that
more
they don't
energy.
have there.
So back to the angels or spirit guides. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them you say are they can communicate with you better in your travels because they have been humans at one time.
Mm-hmm. Some, yeah.
Yeah, so that presupposes that it's likely or seems that there would be angels living as humans right now in human form.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a word. It's not a word in my mind that I use to define things. I think that word is a pretty loaded word because
Uh-huh.
of obviously the long history of religion
Yeah,
in
yeah.
people's minds. So when you say angel, they're thinking some,
Jesus Christ
shining
or
whole.
God the Father.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think that word invokes the wrong kind of
Uh-huh.
vibe around it sometimes, but certainly most of what people interact with as a spirit guide was at one point human, did manifest as human. It actually helps make communications smoother between here and there. And when you come across personalities that seriously are never were human, they've never physically manifested, or if they have physically manifested it wasn't here. That
Uh-huh.
communication process sometimes is a little bit more
It'd
a
be
little
like a dog that doesn't know you, a rabid dog that's just scared or has never seen a human or an animal, a wild animal. I would guess there's.
generally speaking, they're aware that we're here. We're just not aware of them and the communication patterns. Like, again, we were talking earlier about words and how language is actually kind of a clunky communication
Yeah.
style, right?
Yep. Yep.
And on the other side, it's like once your energy field comes into contact with another energy field, everything that you need to know about the situation, the energy is immediately transferred. So there's not a lot of actual word happening in a lot of cases.
Uh,
And what we do is we translate that energy vibration into words so that we can understand it, so we can bring that information back here with us to our consciousness.
so spirit guides, it would be entities I would imagine that are sticking around or they've had a human experience, so they understand you and they want to help, right?
Yeah.
And what do we call them, angels or spirit guides or both? Put them in a class. Some of them are incarnated now as humans. Did you ever go? Does it ever happen where you meet one in your astral travels, a spirit that goes, hey, Joe or Sally? When you see them, will you tell them, like, remind them they're actually an angel or spirit guide, or I know them?
Some people do that kind of mediumship where they're reaching out to spirits on the other side and bringing messages back through for humans.
Uh-huh.
It's not a practice that I do. Mostly what I do is work with people and spirits on their transition
Uh-huh.
process. So I will work
No,
as a
I know that would be a little uncomfortable for me. I wouldn't, I don't, I would, a lot of them are fake, fraud. What do you call them? The fortune tellers or the seances. What I mean is, if I was a spirit and when you travel out of body, if you were to run into me, I'm a spirit now, I'm pretending. I'm like my friend, my brother, whoever you want to call it, another spirit. He's incarnated and doesn't know it. And maybe I shouldn't tell him, but he's depressed and he's about to kill himself. I go, Kat, could you just tell him for me? It's like, don't don't worry, everything's okay, something like that. That's kind of message.
I personally have never had it happen where some like an entity on the other side had a specific message that they wanted me to come back and deliver to somebody I knew or somebody in my experience. I have done work. Part of the training that I did with them was working with individuals in their dream space. So when we do have somebody who is working through something like that in their dream space, and they're having difficulty processing it, or something's not going right with the scenario that they're working out, they're starting to freak out, there is a call to assistance that goes out. And so I do have some experience working with people in their dreams as they try to sort things out, which is a very odd experience. I think more than any of the other ones, really, that one kind of upset me.
So
like when I realized
realized
that's what we were doing, I was like, oh no, that's upsetting. To me, it felt, as a physically focused human, it felt like a violation of people's privacy, which I wasn't keen on, right? I didn't care for that, but...
And are you referring to now the lucid dreaming? When you say dreaming, or you said dreams?
Yeah. I mean, how do I say this? People think that dreams are happening inside their head, but it's a shift of consciousness, just like any other shift of consciousness.
Yeah, I do think dreams are happening inside my head, but now you mentioned the radio channel. I get it. It's not.
Yeah. It was one of the hardest things for me to reconcile growing up with it and figuring it out. Is for a long time, I was kind of mad. Like, why are you in my head? Why are you in my head? Why are you doing this to me?
So when
you're
dreaming or these lucid dreams, technically they're not the classic definition of dreams in your head. You're traveling.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it wasn't, that I had stopped dreaming, that it wasn't a dream.
I see.
For a long time. Like, I thought I was just, having these odd psychotic episodes for a long time. See, I didn't grow up escaping from like Catholicism or anything, but I had to grow up and break free of the scientific model in order to understand what was really happening to me.
I can tell you, I'm a bit open-minded too. If you're talking classical science, forget about model. There is none for this kind of stuff. It doesn't exist. It's period.
Well, I mean, what happens is, let yourself start talking about stuff like this, especially as a teenager, and find out how fast you end up diagnosed with something. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of this would be considered a mental illness of some kind if you went to go to the doctor about it.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of escape from that thought process for myself. For a long time, I was like, why am I having these like serious delusions, and what is going on? And I had difficulty reconciling it because I wasn't having adverse effect. Like, I was able to tell reality apart when I was awake and walking around. I do get clairaudience or get hit with visions and stuff, but I wasn't having any difficulty sorting out the difference between that and what was going on here. Like, I knew I wasn't crazy, but I didn't have any way of understanding it. So,
have you discovered any scientific explanation, such as it's a gene or a hereditary thing, you fell down and hit your head, and when you woke up, like that piano player, the guy who just plays piano like he was Mozart, and he never had a piano lesson, somehow he's just, the way things work. Do you have any theories on why you are able to do it so easily, even though you had to read the meditation book?
Well, I do think that you have certain people who came here with the idea of what they were wanting to do or a direction they were wanting to take their life in. So, I do think that there are some people that come into the world, and that's just that part of it, that aspect, that spiritual or psychic aspect is not what they're here to focus on, right? Whereas other people are like, no, this is what I'm going to be focusing on. This is what we're doing. I don't think it's a genetic thing. I don't think you have to bonk your head as a baby in order to have any of this happen. I think that these psychic abilities are a human birthright. It's the expression of who you really are as a personality construct, or a soul, if you prefer to use that word, as an energy being. And I think that the only real difference is how open-minded you are to what you can and cannot do.
This would be like it'd be like I got Sirius FM, the XM radio in my car, and I've got the one channel that's the human channel. And at any time, I could touch that fast forward button and change the channel. I've just been told that doesn't work. That's not what that's for. Don't touch it, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not like my spirit doesn't want me to go back and forth. It just doesn't somehow
Yeah,
forgotten that there's
literally.
a button. Maybe the
Yeah,
button got
and
dirty. The car got dirty. I can't even see the button anymore. It's right there in front of me.
well, I mean, like being human doesn't come with an instruction manual.
Uh-huh.
We're not born with, and the way that we're socialized, at least at this point, it's not like you grew up. If we started from when we were kids growing up being told, like, yeah, you can quiet your mind and have silence
Well,
in
we
there
won't
for
go
you
start
can,
down that path, Kat, because I try to stay positive. I mean, religion doesn't help to start with. So some people would be, yeah.
I would say this is in my experience, so take it, take it or leave it. But their religion really, again, it depends on how you're using it, right? Some people can take the messages out of religious texts and go on to be perfectly happy people who read that energy and say, okay, so, be a giving person, be a kind person, don't chase money my whole life. Some
Mm-hmm.
people can take those messages and use them energetically to have a very positive experience.
Sure, the Ten Commandments, nothing wrong with those. Yeah.
Treat others the way you would like to be treated is, I say, a pretty a pretty solid
But I'm
energetic
thinking
standard.
like my grandmother, for example. I can't remember what started the conversation, but more or less I said, "Don't you ever talk to God?" Now we're
Hmm.
Christians, right? She's like, "Oh, only the priest." She's 85. Only the priest, she said, can talk to God. I'm like, "What do you
Which
mean,
is
Nana?"
wild.
I know it's crazy. I'm like, "You've never prayed directly, like said, God, can you please help me?" Or God, I would like this, or God, I'm sorry about that. Well, never, because she was told by somebody at her church
Yeah.
when she was when you're very young, only the priest can
And
do that.
the really interesting, this kind of derailed conversation, but the really interesting thing about that is it's, to my way of thinking, it's a perversion of what's being said. Because Jesus literally said,
Yeah,
these priests are, no,
yeah,
go home and pray. Don't be
yeah.
out on the street corner showing off your religion. Don't be in these synagogues doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Go home and pray. Make your religion private. Make your relationship with God about you and God.
Yeah.
So it's,
For me,
unfortunately, those things get taken over by humans who want to use them as control
yeah,
structures,
yeah, yeah.
which is really unfortunate. And that's where things turn pretty toxic for people.
Mm-hmm. They don't know the whole history of their church and whatnot, or they can't get out of it. But um, so what is extra dimensional travel, or have we been talking about that?
Yeah, literally, there are a lot of different frequencies to explore out there. There's a lot of different radio stations. And depending on how you're tuning yourself, you can end up in experiencing a lot of different flavors of reality, a lot of different physics structures, basically. And I don't know if you want to call that extra dimensions or parallel universes. Some people call it the realms. Some people call it the levels of ascension. There's a lot of different
How do
terminology
you?
people use for it.
We've been using the term radio station because we understand that a dial
Mm-hmm.
or a frequency like 100 or whatever. What do they do now? Even on the satellite stuff, it's like channel
Yeah.
23 or channel 32. There's a number to it.
Mhm.
If you don't keep track of the number, how do you know where you're at and where you can go?
For me personally, and again, you got to understand, this developed over like 30 years of sorting things out for myself before I ever, tried to speak out loud about it. And I never did, as I've said, take on any kind of training or socialization about it. But for me, it's a feeling, an energy feeling. So being in physical reality, but in a astral state has a different degree of dissemination than, say, moving straight into another sphere of reality. There's kind of a different texture to it, a texture to the feeling of it, depending on where you're going. And so for me, if I'm trying to get out of my body here, that's more of a full body experience. I'm literally kind of creating an energy body and just sitting up out of my body and getting up and moving around in this space. But if I'm going to be moving directly into some other sphere, That's more of a concentrated energy here in the center of my forehead, and moving into the blackness, into the void state, and letting images, places, and things pop up in front of me, and sort of feeling which one is most immediate or which one needs my assistance. And then literally stepping into that image or that sphere of
It
reality.
reminds me, we're talking about religion, the Bible. There's a quote from, I think, Jesus. It says, "In my Father's house, there are many rooms."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because the picture came to my mind as you're doing this, like, what if it's like a darker house and I don't know which room I'm in? And that popped into my head, like, in my Father's house, there's many rooms, Daniel. What does that mean? Different room? Kind of what you're talking about, Kat, just came to my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting in reading the scripture from my standpoint, from my viewpoint as a non-Christian and somebody who's been doing this type of stuff for a long, long time. I can read a lot about what Jesus is saying that actually sounds like solid energy principles, that actually it makes a lot more sense from that perspective.
Yeah, it would tangent off. We tangent if so. Well, how did it get so misinterpreted over the centuries and the millennium? Did we try to make it easier for people to understand, or did the priest have a conflict of interest in getting people to come to church more often that he had to change
Well, I
the
think
parable?
it's literally like, you remember when I said that, sometimes when you're working with energy personalities that are trying to explain concepts that are pretty big concepts that we don't really have human words for or human understanding for, when we're receiving that kind of information and we're trying to put it out verbally to other people like Jesus was, it can be difficult to explain. So he talks a lot in parables or trying to make comparisons, because it's some of these energy principles, they may not have fully made sense to him the way he was getting them through. And as a Jewish person,
well, even now I'm using
needing to translate it into those terms, it was his way of understanding it and trying to spread that information.
Even now I'm using the example of the radio station and Sirius satellite with the the station
absolutely.
numbers to try to explain, just to be able to talk to you about concepts.
Yeah. It's like we really do. We need some way to visualize or to conceptualize what we're trying to understand, which are non-physical energy principles that don't obey our laws of physics here the way we understand them. So you have to, you come up with a lot of parables or analogies. And so when I read it, I can kind of read him going, okay, let me try and explain this. They're going to use a parable. Let me try to help people understand.
So now I'm going to tangent not a lot, but I try to stay positive. So solutions to problems. A big problem. I mean, there's all kinds of problems. We have wars. We have, we have all kinds of issues people are going through. They hate their job. They can't afford to buy a house, live in the house. Their health is bad. Take the health, for example. What, maybe, again, like we're tangenting, so we go back to topic in a moment. But in your travels with other beings, and I understand what you were talking about, where you're like, it's a gift to be here, to experience how to manifest and create where it's not instantaneous. Sometimes it just seems real tough, though. What do you have to say about that from your experiences traveling outside the body?
What I can tell you is that the journey to a perspective of unconditional love is a bumpy one, right? And for a long time, I had all those same questions. I didn't understand their stance on things because they seem unperturbed.
Unperturbed.
Yeah, unperturbed, unbothered by it.
By anything, nothing can go wrong. It's all good.
All of these things are happening, but it's all fine. So it took me a long time to kind of understand why they feel that way. They come off as like it's all fine.
Well, they're not the ones feeling the pain.
Well, that's true. But from their perspective, it's literally why we came down here, was to go through those experiences to expand and see what we can become, what more there is for us to become. They don't look at it in the same way that we do. And I understand how you mean completely. Like standing on the sidelines, their energy for a long time to me felt like people sitting around a campfire experiencing the warmth and being like, oh, the warmth is so nice. It feels so good. Don't you like this warmth? to the logs in the fire. Like, no, it burns. Like, I'm glad you enjoy the warmth, but I'm burning. Like,
Yeah.
and asking me to ignore that doesn't make sense. So I had a lot of those same questions and feelings and thoughts about it.
Well, it'd be
It partially
more the
helped.
why. Like I think more people wonder why, why the suffering? Not that, okay, we asked to be here, but why? What's the point besides not being able to manifest immediately?
It's literally creating tension between two action points. And it doesn't necessarily have to be suffering. I think this is the other thing that people like. We have always collectively had the ability to work to change that. And over time, I think we've tried in many iterations to make things better, to alleviate that, to change the way that we look at things and the way that we treat each other. What Jesus said was an attempt to change the way we look at each other and change the way that we treat each other, change the way that we think about things. So it's really, how do I say this well? Suffering was never the point, but it is possible here. The whole range of human emotions are possible here. And we've yet to figure out a way to fully overcome our focus point on it. So we tend to, if you think about it, so let's look at the mental algorithm. We spend, if we're not careful about what we're thinking about, like we spend most of our time focused on the things that are wrong, the sadness that I feel, the dissatisfaction that I have, click on rage bait videos and feel angry about, like, we tend to cultivate our own life experience algorithm to be focused predominantly on those things. Changing the way that you view all of that. Like, what does your feed look like?
That's why I don't watch TV or read the newspaper.
If your mental feed is full of that kind of stuff, then it's really enhancing the suffering, which is useful in that as you notice all these things that you don't like, that you don't want, it should hopefully generate thought processes about what you would like to do, how to make it better, what things would be good. But what happens is that we never get past that point
it's
of actually.
classical. This is what all the self-help books talk about. Quit thinking about I don't have money and quit thinking about I don't have money.
Okay. Yeah. So there's some solid energetic stuff happening in the realm of the manifestation or law of attraction or whatever they call it. Like, there's some actual solid energy stuff. And if you think about it, if you want to take it back to religion and to Jesus, like, a lot of what he said is your lack mentality is the problem. Take this bread, break it up, pass it around, it will be enough. Take this fish, break it up, pass it around, it will be enough. Like, the lack mentality, thinking that it's not enough, is actually what's making it not enough. So those principles go way back, and a lot of that, Jesus talked about stuff like that too. So there's some solid energy principles in there. I think people.
What kind of tea are you drinking?
Oh, this is lavender mint.
I forgot to get my tea. I actually have some peppermint and mint tea. Next time, 6 months or sometime next year, we'll do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. People mostly have their minds on autopilot. So not those streams of consciousness, that thinking process.
That's what
patterns that have built up since you were a child.
Psychological ones, trauma.
Yeah, it's patterns of thought that have been built up over time, over long periods of time. And it's so automatic and so much on autopilot that you don't realize you're doing it. And that's kind of why I liken it back to your feed, like your YouTube feed or your social media feed, is it's engagement. What are you engaging with in your mind? If you're clicking on a certain kind of content, the algorithm brings you more of that content.
I can't do TikTok anymore or X channel, whatever it is. Immediately before you can go to your homepage, you're getting bombarded by the algorithm, you said, with stuff like, I didn't ask for this. Who's watching this stuff?
Yeah. And it's literally testing a new social media site is testing to see what it is you engage with. But we've been using our mental algorithm since we were born. And so we have this whole feed of things that we've clicked on, that we've engaged with. What are you subscribed to in your own mind?
It seems like we did this to ourselves. And so you have people like Jesus or these other spirits that come in once in a while. They're trying to fix it because you can't. It's like you're in the kitchen. You have all these spices and ingredients and food. You can cook anything, but you're stuck on the microwave dinners or the Jack in the Box, whatever's killing you. And you're like, you have all this food. Why don't you cook something else? I forgot how, or I'm stuck. Someone that's trying to reset it without throwing everything in the kitchen away. Like we don't throw everything away we have in the physical world. It's a great kitchen, but you forgot you're stuck on one recipe, something like that.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I think, to my way of thinking, boils down to, again, the validity input. Like, what is your definition of success? What makes you feel valid as a person?
Well, to answer that, if I was to believe everything you said, Kat, which I kind of do, or at least I've always believed in something outside the physical and other energy, I'd say you don't need validity. There's the old saying, you can't take money with you. You can't take this with you, but you need it while you're here. What is valid? Like, why do you even, what are you? I like the word authenticity. Who are you? Are you being yourself? Are you being real? Are you trying to just do whatever someone else wants you to do because you think you should? That's a waste of time. Validate your soul, who you really are, why you're here.
Yeah. This is how I came to kind of understand their viewpoint and what they consider what unconditional love really is angels and guides, your ascended masters, however you want to term that. Whatever it is you're doing down here, whether you're crying and you're in pain, whether you're angry and punching something, whether you're having a total meltdown in your life, or whether you're skipping around merrily, nothing that you do reflects poorly on them. They don't take that into themselves as some reflection of their worth, their well-being. They are solid and valid and good the way they are. So your behavior doesn't affect them, and they love you unconditionally because nothing that you do makes them feel like garbage about themselves. And it's one of the things that we struggle with here in physical reality, is that a lot of the times the way people act does make us feel some kind of way about ourselves. When people argue or disagree with us, it makes us feel some kind of way about ourselves. When a partner isn't immediately attentive or not doing the things we want, it makes us feel some kind of way about ourselves. The way that other children treated us as kids, or the way our parents treated us, it's influencing how we view and understand ourselves. And it's very hard to get to a place of unconditional love, like actual unconditional love, as long as your own validity and self-worth is based on how everyone else is acting around you.
Except then when you, let me ask you this, when you leave your body, do you get back your solid state, like who you really are, not this DNA that's part of the programming problem?
Yeah, eventually. It's there's a little bit of I like to term it as, like, think about being a deep sea diver. So being here in physical reality is like being at the bottom of the ocean. The energy is really dense. It's compacted, to give us this tangible experience. And as you transition back, it's kind of like needing to come back up, but a little bit slowly so that you acclimatize over time, basically, so you don't get the bends.
Yeah.
And it isn't such a shock. So yes, pieces of that consciousness do start to come in, but it's a gentle process. It's not like you immediately get hit with the entirety of everything you actually are. There's a process of kind of disseminating back out of that, and things start to come on. So I've interacted with individuals that have this sort of almost a kind of dazed thing going on. I've had people be like, "It was just that person," and I'm like, and they're like, "No,
am I lucid dreaming? Is this a dream?"
Right. Like people, sometimes there's a little bit of a confused sort of thing as as things start to redisseminate and information starts to come back in. But that is a process. Some people will call it a life review. And to some degree, I guess it is. It's just, for me, I've never noticed it being for the purposes of, like, I don't know,
judgment,
feeling bad about the things. I've never seen it be a judgment thing. It's more like
I'll be
like
like,
assessing
wow,
the
man, that was a rough ride. It's good to be back.
yeah.
Like where am I? It's good to be
Yeah,
back.
yeah, it really is. It's difficult to explain because again, the suffering and everything that we go through feels so real and so important and so horrible while we're experiencing it. But once you finish your commute and you get back off the train at home,
Yeah, the mountain. Like I just climbed the mountain. Yeah, I climb Mount Everest hard. I almost have frostbite still. It's gonna take a while to thaw out. It's good to be back down, except it's back up
yeah,
or it's out of my
once you
body.
step back out of it,
Yeah.
you start to step away from the experience, and it really does have more of a whoa, that was just me. Think about it like if you were playing a online video game with a bunch of friends in an arena, and you went through
Well,
this whole experience. You're playing Call of Duty, and then you
yeah,
take off the headset, and you're like, oh,
hmm
whoa, that was wild. That run through crazy.
or climbing
So
the mountain.
it's more like that.
There's a lot of hardcore alpinists whose best friends, when they're planning to do solo somewhere in the Alaska wilderness, a mountain that no one climbs in the middle of winter when it's dark, but you don't need to do that, man. And they're driven to do it, and then they do it, and they come back. Like, why did you do it? It's kind of similar. Like, why are we doing this? Because something in the experience is giving us something, but when it's quite
Yeah.
painful sometimes.
Yeah. You can find the spirit or the essence of that, to your point, in any time people are willing to push the limits to explore and experience more. Once upon a time, people got on rickety wooden ships and sailed out into a big blue thing. They didn't know where it went.
Yeah.
You know, there was every possibility that that was going to be hard and horrible, and it was.
Yeah.
There was every possibility that they weren't going to come back, but the expansion, the experience, the growth in our knowledge, there is that factor in there. So you're right. Maybe that's a good way to explain it for people who have difficulty understanding, like, why suffering, why is there so much bad that happens? A lot of it is self-generated. Like, we don't have to be having wars.
Uh-huh. Or
That's
the
not an
people that do
intrinsic part of it.
the people that do the ultra marathons, the Ironman, they run the marathons and
Hmm.
they train for it. And it's painful, but somehow they like the pain. They get something out of it. Maybe their spirit did something similar. You come into this body for the same idea. That's your Ironman. Stick with the
Yeah.
program, man. Don't bow out. Like for whatever reason, I don't know why. Again, what do you get out of it? But maybe it's an idea that came to me.
Yeah. Well, no, to your point, what do you get? I mean, how do you answer that as a mountain climber?
I
What was the point? Because I wanted to.
That's
Because I
exactly
wanted to experience
that's
it.
exact. Thank you, Kat.
Because I
People.
wanted to push myself to see what I was capable of and see what I could overcome and
Mhm.
be able to have this experience that's,
Yeah.
it's not everybody gets this experience. And I think that that's
Uh-huh.
the value of doing it the way I wanted to. So,
And for me, my
yeah.
climbing's not ego based. It's because I've climbed everything. It's spiritual in a way. I just
Mhm.
feel like I just feel like the feeling it does for me. It's not,
Yeah.
yeah, a why description.
And I think that's a really interesting point is that if more people were actually engaged in the things that their heart was actually calling them to do,
Uh-huh.
probably the work it takes to get there or the whatever it is that you have to do to do those things wouldn't seem as much like suffering. I think a lot of our suffering is based in the fact that we've been told there's some kind of way to live your life.
Uh-huh.
And so everyone's trying to fit themselves into that mold, which doesn't feel comfortable and isn't good
And you're
for.
wasting your time. You came here to do something, you're not doing it. That's why you're hurting and pain. You're like, I'm wasting my time. And I don't know what I should be doing, maybe, but maybe you do and you're not doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's again, I can totally relate to not knowing what it is you're supposed to be doing. It's not like you come stamped with something on your forehead that you can
Yeah.
just read like an
Yeah.
instruction manual. You kind of have to follow your feelings around
I
it.
follow the
Uh,
feelings.
but there are things for every person that they're like, no, I really love this.
Uh-huh.
Like, I really love doing this.
Yep.
It's fun. I feel engaged. All the work that I put into it doesn't feel like
Which, by the
torture.
way, if since we're on the track of purpose, some people think it's got to be big and grandiose. If you like to knit, that's your purpose. Like, imagine you're a spirit. You came in your body just so you could knit. Go figure.
Yeah.
Go, what? I don't want to knit, but your spirit did. Knit.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a question of, once again, I think that's a question of perspective and whatever it is we've actually defined success as.
Uh-huh.
Because doing the thing that you love and generating joy for yourself and genuine excitement and genuine happiness, that is a big purpose.
That's
That is a
also a
big
true
event.
tension point, as you phrased it, because that joy is just like the fear and the suffering is a tension point for whatever purpose. It's generating a huge energy off the back end of
Yeah,
when you do it.
exactly. Yeah, when you do that, you're actually generating something beautiful that you're putting out energetically into the
Uh-huh.
universe. And here's the thing is that the more people who do it, the less people are spending their time screaming at each other on the internet. The
Yeah,
less
or you
people who
inspire
are
someone who
exactly.
always wanted to do that and like, hey, how'd you do that? Well, I just got in the car and drove. Like I got in the car. Hey, or started doing it. You inspire people to do what they wanted to do, but they couldn't until they saw you do it.
Yeah, and it's
Like I inspired you, like I'm inspired seeing you. I'm gonna go look for the book. I'm gonna listen back to this show, watch your videos on YouTube, which I'm gonna get to in a moment, and tell them about your channel.
yeah.
Because you can, like, I'm like, well, maybe if Kat does it, I can do it. You inspire people.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible for most people to tap in. I think those types of energy gifts are your birthright as a human consciousness. It's literally just who you are on the other side when you're not here.
Uh-huh.
And really the only thing that holds people back from exploring more of those concepts and getting into it is the belief that it's not possible or it isn't for me or
Uh-huh.
I don't have that psychic abilities are some sort of
Or maybe
genetic predisposition.
I have one that it's maybe they're afraid.
Well, definitely that's a factor. There's certainly a culture, especially once again with dogmatic religion, that says that anything that isn't Jesus is evil. Anything that's, anything like this, it has a
Well, also
stigma
afraid that if
around
I
it.
found out the truth, I would be really mad at myself for wasting so much time. It's like if I found out, it's like I'm waiting to the end of the dance to ask the girl to dance with me. Oh,
Right.
and I'm
It's,
thinking she has a boyfriend. I'm afraid to ask her, and then the dance is over with. And I wouldn't be happy knowing that. I'd rather stay in my belief system, right?
I think the interesting thing is the more that you do experience things like this and do kind of rub elbows with the rest of reality, what you realize is that there was nothing about your experience that was a waste of time.
Uh,
Every part of it was valuable.
yeah, that's a good point.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing about your experience that's wasted. All of it was beautiful and generated something new and different. Your perspective is the only perspective that's yours out
Well,
there.
I learned from the dance, like don't wait till, next time you go around, next dance, don't wait so long. So it's all a learning experience, not wasted, as you say. You learn something every time.
Yeah, for sure. And again, part of that life review process is looking back over it and seeing what lessons and what things did come out of it.
Uh-huh.
It's sometimes it's not the giant achievements or the things like that that make the biggest energetic difference in expanding the knowledge of consciousness. Sometimes it is all of those little things
Yeah,
that ultimately make the bigger energetic impact.
that's good to know. So Kat's YouTube channel is Vibrational You with like the letter
Yes,
U. It'll be in the show notes.
yes,
Vibrational,
absolutely.
the letter U, and she discusses the nature of vibrational reality and how to create effectively and intentionally with your vibrations. She's also a spirit consultant. So, Kat, does that mean you offer one-on-one help with you help people one-on-one?
I do not I do not at this point have any kind of products or services that I
Okay,
offer. So I'm literally not monetized. I just kind of work for the universe and put stuff out there.
nice.
I do collective readings on the channel sometimes, just if I feel called to put some messages out there for
Hmm.
people who might be clicking on it and need to come through and collect their messages. So when I feel called to do that, I do that. But yeah, I'm not actually monetized in any way. I don't have a book to
You can tell you're
promote,
more
and I don't have
trustworthy that way. I tell you that.
yeah, I don't have a book to promote, and I don't have products and services available.
Most people start the other way. Is the first thing they're interested in.
I literally when I started YouTube, I got this vibe, and all of the information and all of the advice is all, in my opinion, energetically predatory,
Hmm.
and I don't care for it. So I don't like the idea of making my videos sound urgent or
The
life
thumbnails, yeah.
changing. I don't like the idea of generating that energy in people just to get them to click on stuff.
Uh-huh.
I don't like the idea of, buy this, buy that. Here's my program for, I don't, and maybe it's because I've spent so much time on the other side and all the things we were just talking about. Like, I don't think that money is the point. It's helpful
But
here
Jesus
for
comes to
doing your
mind.
stuff.
Jesus comes to mind. Um, he's
Correct.
like,
Yeah.
how can I monetize my teachings? Yeah, it's not, I don't think you'll find that in the Bible.
No, I think he was pretty seriously, I think, what did he say? That it'd be easier to get a camel through the head of a needle than it would be get a rich person into heaven.
It can be such a conflict of interest in the human body because you're like, well, I have to make a living. It's my time and, my
Yeah.
time and blah, 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 blah. But this is why, not to really, I just tangent a little bit once here. I was trying to figure out the Ukrainian war because I don't watch TV that much because why do I need to watch that? And someone told me, did you know that Donald Trump wants to put a Trump Tower in Ukraine? I'm like, my God, no wonder we can't solve our problems. Conflict of interest. Anywho, is there anything we haven't talked about, Kat, that I skipped, haven't covered, really important for people to you want them to know from all of your experiences?
I think we covered a broad range of topics, all kind of centered around it. But I think it is really helpful for people to know that they are more than just this physical body. There's a lot more going on. And a lot of the things that we're afraid of is that fear for fear's sake. Everything that comes into this, every living thing that comes into this world transitions back out of it. So there isn't anything in that experience to be afraid of.
Well, you just brought up another idea for me is what about my dog, my cat?
Yeah,
They passed over.
yeah, absolutely.
What do you think happens to them? There's another entity, non-human, just like me. I'll be non-human. We'll both be, my cat, my dog, and me will both have the same energy space.
Yeah. Once the personality construct exists, it exists in perpetuity. So your pets and animals are valid source energy creations as well, valid personalities. And I think anybody who has pets knows pets have different personalities.
Uh-huh.
So there's definitely living a real soul in there.
Uh-huh.
And in my experience, when you get animals through, like they definitely, when you're reaching out to them, they still come through as themselves. When I call for I had a kitty, Bella, who's also transitioned already, but if I'm, meditating and I call out to her the same way that I used to, like, come here, I can hear her, I can feel her. She moves and she feels exactly the same way as she did. So sweetie, she still comes if and when I call. So, yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to your pets that way and reconnect with them.
The more I ask, the more questions I have. Anywho, Kat, thanks so much for being on my show.
That's no problem at all. And anytime you want to ask more questions, just let me know. I'm happy to do the chit chat.